what they do. And that's difficult and long-term engagement. Sustainability in development. When I visited Haiti in the aftermath of the earthquake, what was very clear to me was that we needed to think differently. Haiti has been receiving development aid since 1955, and by any stretch of the imagination, it's hard to see how this country has really grown substantially from that time. But if it's going to be sustainable, it needs to grow economically, and that means a new 10-year horizon in our development proposals for Haiti. I'll put it very simply with the example of the mango chutney factory. Haiti produces a great fantastic number of mangoes, but they have huge problems exporting them. It's a long way to Europe. Mangoes have to be looked after. They have to fit our standards, and our standards are high, as indeed the US standards would be too. And if you simply export, if you like, the raw material, then the potential for the economy is less. So let's look at a mango chutney factory. You've got to build a factory. You create the jobs. You've got to create somebody to make the jar, and the label, and the packing, and the producing, and the shipping. Huge numbers of jobs. But you have a product that is longer lasting, and you can export anywhere in the world. So thinking differently about development with the potential to help the economic growth in countries that either have been devastated as Haiti has from the terrible earthquake, or simply the opportunities in parts of Africa and Asia where serious development work and aid for trade can make a difference. Building the infrastructure to enable them to get to market is often the most significant thing that you can do. So thinking differently about how we do that. Good for us, good for them. After all, if you get sustainable economies through development, you can move your development aid elsewhere. The purpose of development aid should be to not be needed anymore and to use the money somewhere else. But you also get economies that start to buy our products too. We sell our goods, they export their goods. That's the best and growing relationship. These are market potential opportunities as well as inherently important in themselves. Conflict prevention. The EU has a monitoring mission in Georgia. When the conflict began in Georgia, we were very conscious that we had not been as effective as we should have been, to put it mildly, when the war broke out in the former Yugoslavia. So the mission in Georgia is something we take very seriously, to watch over the situation. The peace between what's happening in Georgia and the breakaway two regions and Russia will be made in Geneva where the talks are going on. Meanwhile, the monitoring mission is there to ensure that things do not get out of hand, to keep the situation calm, to be able to resolve difficulties when they do occur, and they do. Serbia and Kosovo, where recently I was involved with the President of Serbia, President Tadic, in helping him to put forward a different resolution to the United Nations, in order that Serbia and Kosovo could draw a line under the International Court of Justice opinion on Kosovo and its status, and they could move on. Move on not by asking them to break their own red lines. I'm not asking Serbia to recognise Kosovo tomorrow. 5 member states of the European Union do not. But I do believe that the future of Serbia and Kosovo lies in the European Union. The question is, how do we get them there? We get them there by taking bite-sized steps, chunks out of the problem, and enabling them to have the kind of dialogue that will take them forward. So we're busy doing that. But one of the reasons for doing that is because it's very easy in tense situations where people are not sure that their leaders have a plan for conflict to arise. It's very easy to see the spark, which can turn a difficulty into a crisis and can lead to injury or even death. That's very important and something that I think we have to do, to find a solution through resolving the conflict, but making sure that we're helping to prevent the conflict. Crisis management. When I've described the situation in Haiti, but I could easily talk about Pakistan, bringing together the resources of the European Union in order that they can operate as one. That means everything from humanitarian aid, which can get out quickly to support countries in crisis. It also means having development tied to a longer term. It means putting resources on the ground that can be most effective. So in our case, we sent a lot of Italian teams out who had dealt with the earthquake in Aquila in Italy, who knew what was needed and what needed to be done. We also worked with our member states to provide ships to move machinery. There was one ship actually came from the UK, spent its entire time around Haiti, simply going around the island, moving heavy machines by sea. Because the roads were difficult, often clogged up, impossible to get through, so they could simply move it by sea. Possible ships, moored off, who could bring surgeons to support people in desperate need. Bringing together resources to deal with crises more effectively is a really significant part of what I believe Europe should be doing. Just an example. I'm going to wind my remarks to a close, but I want to just end by saying this. We're at the beginning in Europe. My course has been, I was half created in December and half created, in October and half created in February. Because I'm half commission, half council. I have two hats. I have a term that lasts 5 years, but I'm the first of many, and the real proof of this will be seen as we look back in years to come. We did, though, make some success. We had the first coordinated EU walk out of the UN last week, on the back of the outrageous remarks of Ahmadinejad about 9/11. 27 voices saying a message, better together. But it really is only the beginning. And to prove it, I will tell you the joke that I like to tell very much to audiences about the reality. You remember that Henry Kissinger once famously said, you know, who do I talk to in Europe? When Richard Holbrooke called me, he always goes, hello, is that Europe? But the joke goes that Secretary of State Clinton goes in to see President Obama and says, good news, Mr. President, we have at last a phone number for Europe. We have a high representative, and it's her number. And the President says, here, that's fantastic. Why don't you ring it? So they ring my number, and I say, welcome to Europe. For the German position, press 1.
Post questions and answers. And I would like, if you have a question, just go to the side here. There are microphones on both sides. So please feel free to make your way to the microphone, and we'll just rotate back and forth. I'd appreciate it if you would just identify yourself, maybe your name and your affiliation. And maybe I'll just begin by posing one question on my own that you sort of make your way to the microphone. And that is, so we've got a very good picture of the kind of common project that Europe's been able to engage in successfully over the last year, couple of years. I wonder if you're in a position to be willing to tell us today, what are some of the areas in your experience so far that have made it the most difficult for Europe to speak with a single voice? What are the 2 or 3 issues over which that unity of voice has been elusive? If you could just maybe tell us what you think those areas primarily would be and why.
I think there's 2 or 3 that I would pick up, and it's about always remembering that the domestic situation for these 27 governments plays big, and that it's never to be underestimated. These are elected politicians who come together for a first council under my chairmanship, or in the European Council under President Van Rompuy's chairmanship, but they are still domestic politicians, so they're always mindful of that. Kosovo is a good example. 22 out of 27 recognise Kosovo, 5 do not. And when you look at the reasons, you can see the domestic agenda writ large for them, as they contemplate the idea that perhaps there are areas of their own countries that will quite like the idea of breaking away. There's lots of issues like that. I think in terms of a difficulty that we've resolved is also that countries have very different perspectives. When we looked at putting sanctions onto Iran, which we did do, there was a lot of debate, because for some, the value of sanctions needs to be really understood better than for us. There were some who wanted more, there were some who wanted less, there were some who were very unsure that this was the right way to go. And we resolved that by debate and discussion. But there are very often very different views that play. And the third one is remembering geography. So you've got domestic politics, you've got different perspectives of how to use different instruments, and you've got geography. That the Middle East is very, very important to some countries in the European Union, much less important to others. Russia is incredibly important to some, much less important to others. So sometimes the challenge is getting the priorities right. Where do we focus our energy? Where do I focus my energy? I'm always in trouble whatever I do. But, and I'm always in the wrong country whatever I do. But the truth is that's partly about the competing priorities. And I think one of the greatest challenges is to try and reconcile that, which we certainly run into the problem from time to time.
Okay, why don't we start on this side and we'll go back and forth and so introduce yourself and close your comment.
Thank you very much. Oleh Kotuba, Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures. You mentioned Ukraine as a country that attempts or tries to assume a European identity yet does not want to join the European Union. I believe it's seen a little different in Ukraine. It's rather that the European Union doesn't want to open its doors to Ukraine, and Ukraine would like to be a member of the European Union. My question is, last year your predecessor, Javier Solana, expressed his opinion by saying that the European Union is deeply frustrated with Ukraine, yet they continue to work with that country. And my question is, what is your current status? I know that you've recently visited Ukraine, and that currently also a association agreement is being negotiated with Ukraine. And what is the current status on that? And also, what do you think about the current development in Ukraine regarding the freedom of speech and other issues under the new president, Yanukovych? Thank you very much.
I can give you an hour lecture on that. But I'll try and pick up some key points from that. I think Ukraine is not particularly see its picture in the European Union. I think it sees itself as having a European identity. It's a country that has got to maneuver its relationships between Europe and Russia and get it right. Yanukovych, I think, trying to do that. We are a significant partner for Ukraine. We want to have strong economic ties to the Ukraine, strong ties too because of energy needs. We don't want the pipelines turned off. We want to support Ukraine to be able to manage the pipeline system better. And we're pleased when it has a stronger relationship economically with Russia that enables that to happen in a very selfish way, but a real way. I think for the people of Ukraine, with this particular government, that's how I interpret what they see. They like the closeness to Europe. Russia was the first place that President Yanukovych came to after his inauguration, which I attended, and then he went to Moscow. And that was significant for us because it recognised the continuation of strength of the relationship. But I think he's also right to make sure he's got strong relations with Russia because of where his country sits. So that's how I see it going. And he's, inevitably, he's going to play that game a little bit of spending more time with us might help Russia be nicer to him and vice versa. So there's a sense of that too. But I think European identity rather than membership is what I think the Ukraine sees itself. It's not that we don't want it, it's just that that's not really where the future lies.
And about the freedom of press?
Pardon?
The freedom of press and speech?
I haven't got freedom of press speech to hand, so I'm not going to comment on the speech on that way. I learned that a long time ago.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Martin Walner. I'm an undergraduate in Austria. My question is regarding the future of Europe. And I think undergraduate in Austria, part of the majority of Europeans have wanted to want the future of the EU to be positive. The question is only how it's going to get involved in the EU, because right now the EU has the United States as the full member of Europe, but the young Europeans as the full member in Brussels, and it doesn't seem like possible to get involved in that. Why is the EU not making it better?
Well, it's a really good question. And in all truth, one of the things we've got to grapple with, I plead poverty. I only have a budget or staff because the Parliament has to make the final decisions. But one of the big challenges we've got